Hi, I'm Bhavna Sharma,
I'm Jamie Howard.
and we're the Bloody Broads Pod, and we're welcoming you to the second part of our Shining extravaganza.
Our Overlook ball, as it were. Okay, so if you want to pick up where we left off.
Okay, yeah, so we were last talking about Danny and Jack's relationship and how comparatively it was way more wholesome in the books and a lot more, probably a lot better than a lot of our relationships with our dads, let's be honest. Shout out daddy issues. And how it doesn't really worsen until he actually got much deeper and deeper into the hotel's clutches and his own spiral.
Yeah, and so when we talk about kind of, again, being overcome by location, building up this prison for ourselves, something that we don't get in the movie that I so wish we did, that's used really well throughout the book, is the hedge maze coming to life to devour Danny. And when you are a child, especially as a child raised by, an addict of any type, or someone who, might have mental health issues or just general health issues, there's not a lot you can do for yourself. You're just kind of slowly being taken over by the situation. And I feel like the book does a much better job of illustrating kind of that slow decline of their relationship, where you're literally watching your dad collapse on himself right in front of you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. And like you said, the maze was such a great kind of interpretation of that as well. And the thing in the book versus the film is that the film had the luxury of like, let's cut forward 10 months or whatever it was. And then you've got them all strung out, crazy 1,000-yard stare, blah 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 out the window. But then in the book, however, it took a long time to get to that point. Like, you can see the little nuances here and there where Jack's relationship and Jack's intentions and Jack's everything kind of changed as he went through.
And in the movie, it's this inciting incident of Jack getting ran into by the butler, Grady, in the ballroom. And when I was rewatching it, I was like, oh, he 100% did that on purpose. It literally looks like Grady purposefully drives into Jack with his tray of champagne. And this is the infamous, Mr. Grady that killed his twins and his wife. So the Grady twins that appear to Danny.
Yep.
And we get the whole bathroom scene of Grady warning Jack about Dick Halloran. And also, the book is somehow less racist than the movie.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, because I don't know if it was just the way that Grady talked or that he was putting extra emphasis, or I was just looking for the extra emphasis on the word that we are not going to ever say.
Ever.
Because no, it's not our place. He says it twice, I believe, and then Jack repeats it back to him. It's almost like the "Do you know the Muffin Man" scene from Shrek.
Oh my god!
Like, except with that word,
but with a racial epithet.
Yeah, I mean, Dick could probably make you a nice batch of muffins, but
I mean, unless you want to call him a racial slur. And it's this whole idea of like keeping him in line, keeping whoever you see as less than in line, the women, the children, people of other races. Like, he goes on a whole tirade about how they need to be corrected.
Yeah, and then, let's not bring up the whole Kubrick and then colonialism and all that stuff.
So again, in the documentary, we can do a quick aside. In the documentary that we referenced in episode 1, so Room 237, which is actually 217 in the book, they interview people who have theories about what The Shining is quote unquote supposed to be about. And one of them harps on the idea of American colonialism as it pertains to Indigenous people. And I absolutely see some of the themes, especially with the decor of the lodge itself. To me, that stuck out. And it is set in Colorado, technically, so that I understood. But, using someone else's culture as your decor and not really having any connection to it and not in a respectful way whatsoever.
No.
Um, Having, a shot when Jack is in the pantry. Well, for the first one that it happens is when uh, Dick is showing, Danny the whole, like, here's all the food you're going to survive on for 5 months. It's all canned. And we get
Yeah.
the indigenous man's head in a can, and it's the brand of baking powder. Yeah, of baking powder.
Yeah. And I'm pretty
Um,
sure there was like a Land O'Lakes butter thing somewhere.
yes, yeah, that
Yeah.
too. So there is a recurring theme of indigenous imagery being used, and how this is all about basically the white man coming up and killing everybody, which I could see 100%. But I think that pulls away from the bigger picture of, again, the family unit being haunted by alcoholism, being haunted by poor choices, being haunted by their own choices, meaning like not just, what is being done to them, but what they allowed to be done to them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly that. And I mean, on one hand, since you brought it up already, like with the imagery with the indigenous people and then like in the lodge itself, and then
Mm-hmm.
like there was like a throwaway mention I think Ullman made about something about it being indigenous land. I forget. I know in the book they mention it, but I forget if they do in the movie.
He does, yeah.
Yeah. But it's very much aesthetic y.
Yes.
Like, and I find the film to be super aesthetic, even within a horror sense.
Which goes back to my opening comments where I was like, the book is great and the movie is good if I want to like have a vibe. If we really want to embrace the insanity of quarantine, you guys, again, watching this in 2021 after surviving 2020 and of course this year because COVID didn't go away,
No.
really gave me another level of, I'm going to call it oh shitness.
Yeah. Yeah. It was rewatching it, and then in the context of like the last year, I was just like,
Yeah,
uh-oh.
so for
Like
those that
what
can't see at home, we're both like holding our hands to our
yeah.
face, a la Macaulay Culkin and Home Alone. And it's,
Speaking yeah.
oh,
But
no
speaking
worries.
of COVID, remember when we weren't supposed to do that?
Oh, yeah,
Feels like 84 years ago.
I know. That feels so long ago. But it's, again, this kind of plays into this idea of things being circular. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the impossibility, I know we talked about this in episode 1, the
Yep.
impossibility of the window in Ullman's office, the layout of the apartment is impossible, the fact that the TV is not plugged in,
Yep.
the layout of the hotel when Danny is making his circle in his big
Mm-hmm.
wheel, he actually goes up a level. And we
Yep.
see that happen, but you can't, there's no, he never goes upstairs, there's not a ramp, he never gets in the elevator, although he's acknowledged the elevator as a source of something,
Yeah.
And then we get and I want to come back to the red rum scene in a minute, but we get the realization, Wendy's realization, when she goes down and finds Jack's papers, and she realizes he's just been typing, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. All work and no play makes, over and over and over again. And again, that goes back to my opening comment for this episode is
Mm-hmm.
or I guess this was last episode too, the futility of labor. We're like, we can do all that we need to do and we can do our part, but unless there's some bigger force at play,
Mm-hmm.
it's the inevitable, which again, like I said before, to me is horror, that it's
Yeah.
futile, it's futility.
Yeah, exactly that. And to tie back to the elevator for just a moment and to the red room scene, in the movie when Danny has his like vision from Tony, all you
His
basically
Hey
see,
Vaso Ravens.
yeah, he, and hard enough that he passes out, which does happen in the book, but it's a lot less like I've passed out and did doctor, and it's just more like I took a nap by a tree.
Yeah.
You know,
and Tony is much more, we didn't really talk about this in the beginning, but Tony is much more present.
yes.
And he gets introduced much earlier.
Yeah. So Danny's shine is just so strong that it actually has its own voice, and it's Tony. So in the movie, all he sees, when he is the blood coming out of the elevator and then Danny having some sort of a seizure. So you don't really see what else Danny sees. But in the book, you get right off of the bat you get
Yes.
the image that he gets, because Tony actually says, I don't want to show you. Tony actually tells Danny, like, so it's his own brain trying to protect himself, saying like, maybe no, nah, no, that's enough for me.
Which
Like,
we can go ahead and dissect it like we were going to anyways, but
yeah,
how our own brains cordon off memories and trauma, and
yeah,
it's our own subconscious trying to protect ourselves. And again, when you are raised with a parent that is an addict, you may have gaps in your memory. Or if you just have any sort of childhood trauma, it doesn't have to be from the parent, it can be from anything. Your brain is literally developing differently than your peers that did not experience that trauma. Sorry for those who don't know,
yeah,
this is what my degree is in. So we're going to get real esoteric, you guys.
yeah. Because I mean, yeah, yeah, no, I agree completely. And it's not until Danny himself pushes and he makes Tony show it to him. He's just like, Tony's essentially just like, all right, don't say I didn't warn you. And he shows him essentially what is the last battle
Mm-hmm.
in the book, which is he's running at Jack, running after him, saying like, come here, you little shit, take your medicine. um but the most interesting thing, I think, um that Tony reveals, or Tony says in his vision, is that he yells, poison, poison,
Mm,
which is exactly what Danny would equate to as alcohol, because
yes.
he calls Jack drinking the bad thing. Because you in the book you do get a lot of Danny's inner monologue and the way Danny sees the shine. Like there's a lot of cool little formatting and stuff. Like his thoughts are in brackets, or like his visions, his shine are in
Which
brackets.
I love.
Yeah, me too. Because on a side note, for his visions and stuff, there's actually a cute little scene where like they're moving into the hotel. I know, a cute scene in The Shining, where they're actually moving in and people are leaving. It's like checkout day or whatever for everybody else. So like he sees this like woman, this like middle-aged woman, giving like a thing to a bellboy, like giving a bellboy her bags, and then all he hears is like, I'd do anything to get into his pants.
And he's
And
like,
then
why
what?
does she want his pants?
Yeah, so later he was gonna ask his mom, but he's like, I don't think so, because the last time I asked my mom something like this, I got in trouble. So he goes when Dick is actually talking to him later, wholesome Dick, not whatever the movie Dick was.
Movie.
No
Yeah.
disrespected movie Dick, but yeah. So he goes, he goes, why would that lady like want his
Wanted
pants or
pants.
something? And then he's just like, yeah, don't ever ask anybody about that. Maybe just don't.
Just don't.
Just
And
don't,
that's the
kid.
thing. Again, it's a loss of innocence that he experiences so intensely in the book.
Mhm.
And we get a watered down version of it in the movie where it's just,
Yeah.
why is it horrific for him to see a naked woman in the movie? You know, like what
Yeah.
Wendy's never told him like, oh, naked women are bad or whatever. Like she hasn't
They've
even
had no reason
broached.
to.
Yeah, like he's what, 5, 6? Like they
Something like
haven't.
that. Yeah, like
Yeah,
4 or 5.
he hasn't broached like the idea of sexuality with his parents yet, and so there's no
No.
reason for him to find that gross.
No,
And
and the way he actually sees it, they pointed out in the book, it's not sex or anything. He feels the love off of them. So even if
yeah,
they're lusting each other, he equates that with love.
love. And he,
So that's
oh
it.
god, yeah, the fact that he can, oh, bless his heart. Danny in the book makes me like want to hold him and be like, it's okay.
Yeah.
The fact that he knows when his parents are like having sex is horrific as an
Yeah.
adult. But as a child, he didn't know. He was like, oh, my parents are laying down and loving each other. And he says
So
that
maybe I
because,
shouldn't open the door.
yeah, he says that because he wants to open the door. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, my biggest, boldest note in our note section is, the real danger being Jack and his rage. And
Yeah.
no matter what theory you buy into the movie, whether you buy into the fact that it's about alcoholism or you buy into the fact that it's about genocide of indigenous people, or the third theory that gets brought up in the Room 237 documentary is that it's about Nazism and the Holocaust. It's the rage of white men. Like that's the be all end all in this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we could both talk about that at length. But I think a lot of it also speaks for itself at this point, where
Mm-hmm.
it's very interesting to me that this movie got made by Stanley Kubrick, who is a white man.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was the late 70s, early 80s, shocker. Um, but that he boiled down so many of Jack's interaction to misogyny instead of
Mm-hmm.
taking responsibility for his actions as an alcoholic. That
Yeah.
it felt like he made Jack less than, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. And again, to compare it to the book, Jack is a far more desperate man
Yes.
and desperate to please. So the in the book itself, like we said before, he is a recovering alcoholic. He essentially got sober because of an ultimatum from his wife, you know. Um, and he didn't get sober alone. He did have a buddy. So he had his own crude little version of AA
AA.
with
Yeah.
his buddy,
Wasn't
whose
it
name escapes me. Al?
eh, was it Al? Because I thought it was
Yeah.
funny because I was like, oh haha,
Yeah,
Al
yeah,
gone.
because that's
Yeah.
I made that joke to myself.
Or I mean, also the fact that like it's a friend, and in the book, again, spoilers, which if you've made it this far in the episode, we hope you're aware of.
Yeah.
In the book, it's because he's hit a tricycle or a bicycle, and he
And
doesn't know if there was a kid attached to it.
yeah, and that kind of scares him straight,
Yeah.
like right away. And like this is, I think it's before he beats the student.
It's right before. It's right
Right
before.
before he beats the student. So like when he beats the student, he wasn't even drunk. That was his rage, which ties back to Jack's rage. So it's more of, so he's desperate in that sense. He's lost all credibility as an academic, because you even mentioned that they even mentioned in the book that he was like the youngest person to have gotten that position that he had
In
at the
his whole
school as well.
department. Yeah, yeah.
Whole
He's
department.
like a wonder kid. Yeah.
Yeah. And all that stuff. And then he lost it all like that because, yeah, the kid was in the wrong, but you shouldn't have beat the kid up, because essentially he gave the kid a bad grade. He was on some sports team, your small town America story there. Like, he needs the grades to be on the team. He doesn't have the grades. He gets kicked off the team. Kid then keys his car, which,
And it was
yeah.
a VW bug. Like, who cares? Like,
Yeah.
In the 70s, paint was like 30 cents a gallon. Like, why do you care so much?
I know. And then he just lost it. And then, then his home life spirals. It like Wendy's just like, fuck this shit, essentially. She's just like, I take my kid, I need to get the fuck out of here.
Yes, she's so much more of a person in the book. It makes me like so not even annoyed, because that's such a surface level word for what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so disappointed that the version that people see of her, they equate with, oh, Shelley Duvall was just acting like, okay, so one of the original reviews for this film calls Shelley Duvall the R word, and I was like, no. This got printed. Yes, this got printed in a national newspaper. It was like she was floppy and R worded, and I was like, what? Which I don't know why I'm that shocked that they used that in 1980, but I was, and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Can you imagine as an actor, if someone called me that, my performance that, first of all, I mean, it's 2021, so I'm hoping like people would, speak up, but I would be, my self-worth would be, I would be like, oh my God, was it that bad? Like, but I mean, again, we lose the context of her character in the book, and we lose her choices. Her independence gets taken away. And so this is my favorite scene in the movie, and we're in the timeline. This is where we are, so this is the perfect time to kind of dive deep into it. When Jack is running up the stairs and she's like, we should take Danny to the doctor, and he's like, he's fine, Danny doesn't need a doctor. And they fight about it, and he chases her up the stairs, and she's got the baseball bat, and he says, I'm not gonna hurt you, I'm just gonna bash your brains in.
Bash them right the fuck in.
Right? Like, as a, again, as a woman in the 21st century, like, how many times have there been, guys we've dated, guys that we've like tried to talk to us at bars or like whatever, an event, whatever, film festivals, wherever, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna like hurt you. I just want to like completely screw up your perception of yourself.
Yep.
And then Wendy has what I call her good for her hit, where she, in my notes, I have it as she eliminated his ass. She just
Yep.
takes a baseball bat and cracked him right across the skull. But it's not out of this like girl power moment. It's out of
No.
desperation.
Yeah, and I think, and this kind of ties into this scene as well. Like, I think that not only was her agency robbed, it's also that the fact that they're only at this hotel and only a family at this point because of her decision. It's all on her. If she says fuck this shit, she's out.
Yeah.
Like, he literally only had, I know I keep mentioning it, but he literally only had one straw left.
One.
So had they adapted this correctly, that scene could have gone completely different.
Well, and on top of that, we lose the idea that um, we don't see Jack snipping the cords to the snow cat machine.
Yeah.
The Sidewinder, that's what it's called.
Yes. Yeah.
I was thinking of like how there's certain like machinery on construction sites that said cat on the side.
Yeah, you only know it later when they go to it, and then it's like, there's
and
nothing
it's
here.
it's not as powerful as he does it earlier on in the book. And then in the book, we'd get the description of her desperately trying to crank it, and us already knowing, oh, the wires are cut. Once again, as I said, the horror of the inevitable. Like, we don't have that. And that's why modern audiences, in my opinion, don't find this as terrifying as it really is.
And that's it too. And this ties back to like Stephen King's work in general. He does such a good job of telling you what is coming that you're dreading it the entire freaking time.
I mean, it's what makes it so scary.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And like it's also one of my favorite I guess tropes or
Same.
not, or like sub I don't know. It's my favorite format, I guess, of horror movies or stories in general, is like where you kind of know what's coming, but you don't know how it's coming.
Yeah. Same.
And The Shining, the book, does a really, really good job of that. Like, for example, with the vision that Danny sees, Danny kind of sees how things are going to play out. Like, he doesn't see the explosion. He just sees, you know, the chase that he does, the distraction beforehand. So the whole bathroom thing does happen in the book. This running around the snow does happen in the book, but then the actual
racist
ending,
bathroom.
the racist,
the racist bathroom,
the racist bathroom. But where was I going with this? Yeah. So it all kind of like so by not seeing Jack cut the wires, and by not seeing Jack do all the little self-sabotagey things that he does, because there's like a whole chapter in the book where he's just going about his daily like maintenance things, which includes the boiler room.
We'll get there because I have lots and lots and lots of feelings.
Yeah, we have to get there. That's one of those things where we won't forget, even with our ADHD minds.
You guys, for those that don't know, Bhavna and I, our friendship is basically a constant game of Pong, where we're like, but if the ball was a different ball every time we hit it back to each other.
Yeah, it's like, where did this ball come from? I don't know, but it's yours now.
I don't know.
Yes. So there's a whole chapter where Jack is going about his daily business, fixing the boiler room, checking the stats there, going about blah, blah, blah. But it's him having an internal monologue of essentially like, fuck this bitch, like, fuck my kid. Like, it's like Grady and co have already infiltrated his mind. And they've already started sliding him down that slope. So he's doing everything still. So he's still functioning. He's still a functional addict at this point. But
so let's talk about that for just a second. If my voice starts to go, it is what it is. So here's my theory again of Grady and of Lloyd. I think Lloyd the bartender was more or less his subconscious being projected out to him. I think Grady was an actual ghost. But if we're going to come at this from the, alcoholism standpoint, it's who he is when he's drunk that is trying to integrate with his sober self now that he no longer drinks.
Lloyd, you mean?
A little bit of
Or
both.
a little bit of both? Okay.
Yeah, a little bit of both. Because how he feels drunk
Yeah.
is what Grady is saying about, like, they need to be corrected. They need to be set on course. He says punished, but he really, I mean, he says corrected throughout the book and the movie as well.
Yeah, and with that flourish too, like correct.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, I said it for like 3 days after, and my significant other was like, what are you doing? So after she knocks him out with the baseball bat, after she eliminates him, she literally seals Jack into the pantry. This woman, like, just put this in perspective, Wendy would literally rather go a few days without what little food they had in the first place than put herself and her child into any more danger, which makes complete sense to, I don't have kids, but like, makes complete sense to me, especially, just wanting to protect your child. But then we get Grady letting him out. And I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I want to hear your theories on it, because Grady is supposed to be non-corporeal.
Yes. He is supposed to be non-corporeal. I feel like it wasn't, because I feel like Grady also, like, in my perspective, also is himself, but he also is a representative of everybody else.
Yeah, that's what I meant earlier. Like, he
represents all the party behind him. He's like the union rep for all the ghosts.
He's the union rep for the 999 happy haunts.
Yeah. So the way I've kind of seen that scene before is more so a Grady kind of channeling everybody else's power. Like, the group has spoken, the group would like this. And I will be touching upon this on our Doctor Sleep episode, because there's so many points that we brought up here where I'm like, I'm just itching to talk about in Doctor Sleep. For those of you that don't know, Doctor Sleep is the continuation of Danny's story as an adult. Danny the kid, because spoiler alert, he survives in both instances.
Thank God. Because I would have fisticuffs with Stanley Kubrick if Danny the child did not survive.
Yeah, I'm like, they killed Dick and that was bad enough.
Yeah, listen, I'm still mad about that forever.
Like, and I kind of get the imagery of that too. Like, I kind of get where he was coming from in that perspective, in that, like, okay, help is coming, but it's futile.
Right. Again, yeah.
But at the same time, really? Did you have to?
Yeah.
But anyway, because in the book, Dick doesn't single-handedly save them. Like, he works with them. Like, they could have done it without him. They really could have. Like, maybe not without his vehicle, but they could have done pretty much the rest of it without him. They just needed his car.
That's what I was gonna say. I was like, they really kind of just sort of needed his car, but
everything else,
it feels much higher stakes in the book as well. Like, you get to see him purchasing the flight from Miami back to Colorado and, like, getting up the mountain. And we do get him up the mountain in the movie. And this is mentioned in the documentary about it, that the car that Jack drives in the movie is the same car but a different color. And then when Dick is shown driving up the mountain to rescue Wendy and Danny, we are shown the correct vehicle and the correct color crashed. And so supposedly that was, Stanley Kubrick's big, like middle finger to Stephen King, that, like, this is my story now, which seems very petty and like a waste of energy, but I don't know that man's intentions. I don't know. Anyways.
Yeah. But back to Grady. In my perspective, I feel like he just channeled their power. Like, I feel like it wasn't just Grady. Sorry, not Brady. He is the
wrong podcast.
But yeah, no, that he channeled kind of their, like, it was the hotel's intent. Like, I feel like it wasn't necessarily Grady himself. I feel like it really was the hotel at that point.
Well, and if we're gonna go on the whole line of thinking that we mentioned in the first episode of a place has its own energy, a place has its own story, stone tape theory, style of haunting, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
That makes total sense, because he would have to channel something larger than himself to get that door open. And I do think it was to the detriment of the movie that we don't actually see Grady opening the door, that we get Jack stumbling out, but we don't get the door sliding open. There is that really cool shot, of Jack telling Wendy, Wendy, honey, I think I need a doctor, which is so
Yeah.
triggering. Like if you've ever
Oh.
been, like just him faking that he needs help, and he's so manipulative.
And it's just
He,
something about Jack Nicholson's style of acting too that just makes it
yes.
extra cringe.
I mean, I love him, but there are
Same.
roles that he's played where I'm like, oh, you're a little too good at this.
Like The Departed.
That one, oh Jesus, yeah.
Mm-mm. Um, no, that definitely, and just to touch upon that as well, like I feel like he brought on the sinister a little too early in the movie.
Yes, because we lose again, and this segues perfectly into my next point. We
Mhm.
lose the building of tension
Yeah,
right off the bat. Like I started our first episode with, we get the ominous music right off the bat. We get the assholeness of Jack right off the bat. There's
yeah,
no build.
no,
And within the first 15 minutes, doesn't Danny see the blood coming out of the elevator?
yeah,
Yes, literally within the first 15 minutes of the movie, it's like, okay. But in the book, we have the mirror of the boiler getting more and more pressurized and dangerous, just as Jack himself does. So, one
yeah,
of the main duties that Jack has in the book is to keep the boiler at the correct pressure, which
yeah,
essentially heats different wings of the hotel throughout the season, throughout the off season.
yeah.
And if you don't, it's going to explode. In the book, that's ultimately the cause of
You get that in the
Jack's
first 30, in the first 30
pages.
pages.
Yeah.
Watson tells him you need to make sure it's regulated. I've even, like, on certain days you do the east wing, certain days you do the west wing, certain days you do the central. I've even color coded it. Here are some switches. Go
Not color
nuts.
coded it.
Go nuts, go ape shit. He did. He color coded it.
He
He was just
does.
like, I forgot what the
He
colors were, but
does.
he was just like, I've made it easy for you. Here are your switches. They're on the boiler. Go nuts, right? Like, but this is the, like, forget to do anything else. Don't forget to do this.
Right.
And like that's his duty, and he
And to me, having the Overlook itself kind of like explode is a significantly better ending. More, it's a better resolution, let me say it that way,
yeah.
than Jack being shown frozen in the snow. As funny as that is, and as
Yeah.
iconic as that scene is. Oh, first of all, I don't want to skip the hedge maze, because
No, that's important.
Danny sort of outsmarting Jack is such a cathartic moment. Him retracing the steps in the snow, it just makes my heart hurt. I'm
Mhm.
like, you poor little boy. Like, I get very emotional when kids are like in that much peril in movies. I mean, full disclosure,
Yeah.
I watched the newer version of Pet Cemetery, and
Mm.
I knew what was coming, and I still cried.
Mhm.
I was like, oh no, like this
I
is
mean, they changed
awful.
a few things around, but you still knew
But
what was coming. Yeah.
yeah, specifically the first like 15 minutes. But
Yep.
yeah, but that's our in a couple episodes.
Yeah.
But seeing Danny have to, he escaped the bathroom. He couldn't get his mom out. She
Mhm.
eventually gets out, but now he's got Jack at his heels, to be
Yeah.
chased by his own father through the hedge maze. And the only way to outsmart him is to confuse him. Is just such like, the parentification of children is always gonna like hit a little, you know what I'm saying? Like it just
Yeah. And then
hits a little
you
close.
you also see the heartbreak in him to have to out that he had to outwit his dad, that he had to
Yeah.
be in this situation because, yeah, he did lose a lot of his innocence, but at the end of the day, he was still Daniel Torrance who was waiting for his dad excitedly on a curb to see if he got a job. Like, oh, that poor
It's
kid.
I know, it's so heavy. And
Yeah,
ultimately, when we move on to Doctor Sleep,
yeah, lots of
ultimately we
thoughts
do
on that one.
see, yeah, we do see the fallout of that, and we do see how he copes or doesn't cope. Um,
Hmm.
but we see Wendy and Danny getting away with Dick Halloran, but we don't. The way it's staged in the book is significantly more emotionally impactful.
Hmm. It was way more of a final girl moment too.
Oh, 100%. Like Wendy's like, fuck this, I'm, I'm out. Like
Yeah, And then yeah, you and like I find the explosion too to be a lot more symbolic.
Oh, 100%.
Because how do you, because look at it this way, let's just say that it was the movie ending was the only ending, you know, like how are you going to live like that knowing that that place is still there, knowing that all of those creatures you kind of or people or entities whatever that you've left behind are still there, still out there.
And again, it's this idea that like if something traumatic happening is what adds to the ghosts of the Overlook, aka the Grady twins,
Yep.
aka the woman who commits suicide, you know, in
Yep.
her room,
Yeah.
you've now created a ghost. You have now created in the paranormal community, there's this idea of like a tulpa, where like enough if enough people
Yeah.
believe in something, it gets created. You've now left your own energetic imprint onto that hotel. I sure as hell wish I could, you know, go back and like erase the site of like traumatic things that have happened, not just personally, but for my friends and like, you know, people I care
Yeah.
about. And you have now added a book to that shelf of this library of horrific things.
Yep.
And it's not your fault, but to me, it's a very heavy burden to carry.
It is. And I feel like it's a lot more symbolic in the book as well because you have that whole cleansing
Mm,
kind of a metaphor and you know fire cleanses, right? Pretty sure everyone's heard that one before. But you know that cathartic raising to the ground, like okay, we finally escaped our abusive situation, like literally and figuratively,
yeah.
and it's gone, it's burned down, there's nothing there anymore, we don't have to think about it. And then like not to jump ahead into Doctor Sleep, but like even Danny's just like fuck that place, goodbye.
I mean, he doesn't want to go back, you know, to even the land that it was on.
No.
Um, and again, that ties into the theories to kind of put a button on the end of the movie. That ties
Yeah.
into the theories of the idea that this, as a film, not as a book, but as a film, is about the genocide of the indigenous people of North America. That, you know, we've blown up their existence, where they live, burned it down, raised it, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Jack's picture getting added to the 4th of July ball photo is obviously very symbolic. But
Yeah.
rewatching it, I was like, just because I, you know, had a very lighthearted view of things this time around, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is just like a ghost getting added to the haunted mansion at Disney World. Like he's
Ha!
just like he's he's the 1,000th happy haunt, you know, like there's 999 or whatever that the ghost
Yeah.
host says in the entrance. But in all seriousness, it's a tragedy. Like
Mhm.
at its face value, the book, not so much the movie, but the book is almost a traditional Greek tragedy.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, for those of us that enjoy that kind of thing, it makes total sense. Again, that my definition of horror being the inevitable, that that it is what it is. It makes total sense that things played out the way they do because it was inevitable. He can't live if he's going to
Mm-mm.
continue to treat his wife and his child like this, and he won't change.
No. Or at
So
least
if he
not live
won't,
the way he's been living.
right, exactly. So if he's not going to change, then fine, he's not going to live at all. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of the inevitable ending to it all.
Yeah. Like we knew the hotel brought out the worst in everybody. Like
Right.
that's just a given. Like it made Wendy a lot more paranoid. Um, yeah. Like she's still a strong character. She's still all of these things, but even in the book, it made her a lot more paranoid. It didn't make her as jumpy, but it did make her more, you know, um, jump to quicker conclusions than she would have if it wasn't the situation that they were in.
Yeah.
Or the place that they were in. With Danny, it made him more scared. He went back to sucking his thumb because that was a whole other thing. Is that he used to suck his thumb when he was scared, and Dick was actually just like, if that thumb wants to go in that mouth, go ahead,
Just let it.
because
Yeah.
the world's fucking scary. You got to do that. You got to do it. You know, things like that, and like you know, with Grady, he already thought his wife and his kids nagged him, and it led him to kill them. The lady in the tub, so the wife and the husband, they were already kind of fucking nuts, and it led to that. Like there's a whole other thing about a maid that was changing a light bulb in that room as well, 217,
Oh my
who
God,
ended up
yeah.
and then there ended up being an electrical fire, but just contained to that room. Like, there's a lot more going on with the room than just the woman in the tub, but it's like, for whatever reason, it was, in my personal theory, is something to do with the Indian burial ground, that they're on the indigenous burial ground. Um, Maybe because I think that room's supposed to be, if I remember correctly, supposed to be like in the center of the place,
Yes.
essentially. So center of things hold power. But yeah.
To me, this movie is ultimately always going to be about hubris, pride,
Mm,
not getting help when you need it, not acknowledging how bad things have gotten,
yeah.
and addict behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's just the be all end all of the situation, because, as much
Yeah.
as we love Mr. King,
Yeah.
we also, off pod, we're like, oh my God, I know this cannot be a metaphor for how he treated Joe. Like,
That like is, that's a whole thing as well. Like, just to jump on that as well, like you do have a lot of the King, Tabitha, Joe, Owen, I forgot their daughter's name. Um, kind
same.
of, yeah.
Oops.
Oh, I'm sorry. We love your family, we swear. But eh, you did. It's hard to not see it, because this was a thing that, honestly, this is probably the best part to bring it up as well, since we are
Yeah.
talking about the addiction portion, is that everybody knows Stephen King was hella fucked up on uh, cocaine, amongst other things. Um, and during this time that he wrote it as well, or like right before this time, I think he got. I forgive my Stephen King timeline, but he either just got sober before this, or he was in the process of getting sober, or something
Yeah.
like that. So like it's very hard not to see the parallels to his family as well. Like, because this book is very dark. It's very, very dark. And I'm not talking about ghosts. I'm talking about family relations. Like, it is super, super dark. Um, because just for so many reasons. But in Stephen, it's well known, he gets Tabitha to like look over his work. Like, very famously, he
Mm-hmm.
was gonna jump Carrie in the trash, and she was
Which,
like, "No."
thank God he didn't.
Yeah, thank God he didn't. But like, but she was like, "No," you know.
You
And I
need to work
believe
on this.
it's
Yeah.
exactly, and I believe it would have been Joe at the time that would have been Danny's age when all of this was going on and whatnot as well. So it's just like, it's hard not to see, at least early on, the wholesome part of it being his Stephen and Joe's um, relationship as well. But it's like, how much of this were the dark thoughts he never acted on?
That's what really gets me, is that so much of it seems like a man writing from the what ifs. And
Mm-hmm.
I would have rather, you know what? Like, if this is how he processed it, great. Because not only did we get something out of it, but like, he didn't do this stuff in real life. I
Yeah.
mean, in all seriousness, like, I think it's just, there's such a stigma still to this day around addiction, around being honest about how it screws with you and what it does to yourself and your family and your relationships. And if this is, you know, if this
Mm-hmm.
is some kind of story that can help people who live with it, then by all
Yeah.
means, like, take it and run with it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the movie is what it is. It's not a faithful adaptation. That's fine. It's still a great
No.
movie. It's just not. It's not, to me. It will never be The Shining. It will never be what
No.
bridges this and Doctor Sleep. Because if you just watch this and then Doctor Sleep back to back, you're gonna be so damn confused, because
You
Mike
are and you
Flanagan.
aren't. Mike Flanagan did do a really good cleanup
I,
job.
yes, that's what I was about to say. Mike
Yeah.
Flanagan, bless his soul, is did such a good cleanup job, and B, was so faithful to the Doctor Sleep book. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost a screen to page, you know,
Yeah.
adaptation at this point.
Except for the minor logistical
Right.
things he had to change up, which we will touch upon in that
We will
episode.
talk about plenty.
Yeah.
So that's The Shining itself. Closing thoughts. I'm gonna also bring up the other theory that gets brought up in room 237.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about the sexual assault theory, they talk about the slaughter of indigenous peoples theory,
Mm-hmm.
but they also talk about how other people see it as a metaphor for the Holocaust, because the typewriter that Jack uses is German. The
Okay.
number 42 is on the typewriter is 1942 when it started,
Yep.
and
Yep.
Adler is the German word for eagle, which of course is a Nazi symbol, famously. They have
Yes.
like the eagle's nest, and they have it on all their insignia and all that good stuff.
Yep.
Um, I don't want to speak for people who are fully Jewish, um,
Yeah.
but
Me neither.
that's not a super big stretch in my opinion. Like I can see that imagery, um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think people took it and ran with it because, again, just like all art, it's subjective, but especially in my opinion, a lot of Stephen King's books and films adaptations, you can kind of overlay it with your own experiences and get something different out of it. And
Yeah.
again, I've been very vocal about this, but having family members who have struggled with addiction, close family members, this just hits home because it's such a timeless story of
Mhm.
the behavior doesn't change until they hit rock bottom, and then if it does change, how can you trust it and things like that.
Yeah. No, I agree. And my I could see that being the nod, the typewriter, but I don't see it being much more than a nod. I don't see it being an
Right.
overarching theme. I don't I think it's more of like, here's all the different kinds of evils in the world. Like if you really want to tie it, he had the playgirl at the beginning, the whole
Yes.
sexualization thing. He's got the typewriter, the abuse, like the alcoholism. So I feel like it's just a whole bunch of vices all at once. And again, disorienting you with them. Um, my kind of final thoughts on the movie is I feel like it tried too hard to be a last year at Marion Bad. Um, not not like ode. Like it was almost like he tried to shoehorn the movie to shoehorn the book's plot to fit the movie, because there's just
100%.
so much of it in it that I didn't even mention, like there's a fade out shot of people walking through like the hedge maze in the movie. And
Yes.
it looks like it looks like something that was illustrated. It doesn't look real at that point, which is like almost like a shot for shot thing from Last Year at Marion Bad, which I don't even know how easy that is to find out there. It's from 1961. It's a French New
can
Wave
you
film.
can you spell it out for people listening?
Yeah. So last year, so LASTYEARAT, MARIENBAD.
Yeah. And
Last Year at Marion Bad.
that's the French New Wave film that
Yeah.
this adaptation was heavily influenced by, to put it lightly.
Yeah, like I watched it in a first year film class, as we all do. We also watched Brick that year. What up, Brian Johnson? Um,
We love you.
we
Bye.
love you. Um, but I watched it, and like having seen the movie so many times by that point and being such a huge fan of the book, when I watched, no one had to tell me that it was like influence. Like the teacher just kind of showed us the film, and then later we discussed it, and later she told us it was an influence, and I was just like, I
I knew it.
fucking knew it, because there's just too many similarities to it for you not to see it. So once you see it, you'll definitely, like, when you overlap the films, you'll just start doing that in your own head. Um, but other than that, yeah, like I said in the beginning of the first episode, I look at this as two completely different things. I enjoy the movie for what it is, um, because it is spoopy spoopy. And it did get me a couple of times. The one scene that didn't get me, and that the only scene that actually took me out of that entire movie, there was only one scene that kind of took me out of it and go like, was when Wendy's running around and she finally sees the ghosts, and she goes
Oh
into the
yeah.
gold room and she sees them all as like skeletons, and I'm like, come on, man,
It looks like Party City
that's cheap.
skeletons.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
it's not even just the production value, it's just the fact that
It's
it was so much better when she couldn't see any of them.
yeah, because she does it in the book. So it's like,
Yeah, it was more like she was going on, it was for her, it's essentially going against, is it her husband's word or her son's word that she's going to take?
yeah.
Uh, we probably could have talked about this for another like 10 hours.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you guys want to share your thoughts, feelings, any of that, we are at Bloody Broads Pod on Instagram and Twitter. Subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend. You can also send us your thoughts via email,
Yeah.
bloodybroadspod@gmail.com. And Bhavna, where can people find you if you want them to find you on the internet?
Yeah. So you can find me at the Lucky Charms on Twitter. That's Charms as in SHARMS. And then you can also find me at the Lucky Charms underscore fancy on Instagram. And again, that's SHARMS, not CHARMS. And where can they find you, Jamie?
I am at Glitter Burrito on Twitter. And I am my whole name on Instagram, Jamie Kirsten Howard, Kirsten as in Kirsten Dunst. All right. Well, I'm sure we will have lots of thoughts pertaining to The Shining, as next up is Doctor Sleep. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm
So read
excited.
up.
Yeah, read up, watch up, let us know what you guys think, and we will see you next episode.
Yeah. We'll see you soon, guys.